Hey everyone, it's Movie Lover 120 here, and I'm here with yet another franchise ranking, my first franchise ranking in a very long time, and that's for none other than all the X-Men movies. Now, for that, guys, this will be a two-parter video, so yeah. First part, this one will be about the original X-Men films and the prequel X-Men films, and part two will be all the Wolverine and Deadpool films. So yeah. Anyway, let's get started with the one that started it all, and that is none other than X-Men. Now, this was pretty much the next success of Marvel to come after Blade. And it works very perfectly. Basically invented a new way for summer blockbusters, and basically helped further launch Marvel into the film industry. So what's the movie about? Well, in Nazi-occupied Poland, young Eric Lynn, who was separated from his parents upon entering the Auschwitz concentration camp, while trying to reach them, he causes a set of metal gates to bend towards them as a result of the mutant ability to create magnetic fields and control metal manifesting, only to be knocked out by the guards. In a not-too-distant future, the two mutants find themselves torn into two conflicting groups that have starkly contrasted ideologies with regard to the development and the mutant kind. Here's why I consider this a good starter, but I don't really think it's the best X-Men movie, per se, but here's why it rocks. It not only revived the superhero film genre, but also kickstarted a film franchise, and we have super movies that is still ongoing to this day, well, was ongoing anyways. Because since now, it's over now that the X-Men are owned by Disney. Great acting from and now back in the MCU, great acting from Hugh Jackman, who always will be Wolverine to this day, Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, and Anna Paquin. It brought us one of the greatest casting superhero movies, such as Hugh Jackman as Logan Wolverine. Wolverine, who is still the best Wolverine to this day. Well, maybe the other Wolverine in MCU might be good, but Hugh Jackman will always be Wolverine and can never be topped, in my opinion. A great allegory on racial tensions in the United States effectively using mutants, a well-thought villain in Magneto, especially cameos from famous X-Men such as Iceman and Jubilee, amazing soundtrack. It even spawned a much better sequel, X2 X-Men United. Now, of course, there are some bad qualities, like storms from this line, like when a toe gets hit by lightning. Same thing happens to everyone else. It's very kind of poorly delivered. The other villains, Mystique, Toad, and Sabretooth, are kind of underwhelming. It hasn't really aged all that well, especially the production designs that's fairly mediocre. Pacing is very slow at times, especially if you know the X-Men only from the movies, not from the comics or shows or games. And Cyclops is useless. And it was a problem that would plague the whole X-Men film franchise, especially, but all in all, it's just an okay movie. How would I rank it? Well, I'd rank it an 8 out of 10. It's sure it's not the best X-Men movie, but it's a good way to start this whole X-Men saga. But then, we get what would probably be my fourth favorite X-Men movie, and that is for none other than X-Men United, aka X2. And here's a great reason. What's this movie about? Now, this was one of the other Marvel sequels to get an even better reception from critics than the first one, with the other next film that would come after the sequel to come after that would be Spider-Man 2. But it's pretty much my favorite of the original trilogy, and it's my fourth favorite action movie of all time. So what's this movie about? Well, William Stryker, a villainous former Army commander, holds the key to Wolverine's past and the future of the X-Men. The threat reignites the call for a Mutant Registration Act. Stryker starts a full-out assault on Professor Xavier's mansion at school. After escaping his plastic cell, after which he was trapped in the end of the first one, Magneto proposes a partnership with Xavier and X-Men to combat the new formidable enemy they both have in common. And here's why this movie rocks. It's an improvement follow-up to the X-Men series. The plot is even more improvement than the first one. I love how we get to know more of Wolverine's past and expand on him. Or we get introduced to Nightcrawler, which, by the way, Alan Cumming gives a great performance as Nightcrawler. In fact, he's probably my favorite Nightcrawler of the series. And is the best part of the movie. He's portrayed faithfully to his comic book counterpart. Hugh Jackman is even more awesome as Wolverine and better than he was in the first one. Same goes for Halle Berry Storm, James Bond as Cyclops, and Patrick Stewart was Rex. Pretty much everybody in this movie was well portrayed better than they were in the first one. Very good acting, especially for all the cast as well. Well portrayed as the X-Men superheroes. And the scene where Bobby's mother asks him if he's trying not to be a mutant is really touching one that deals with the problems of people not being accepted by their own relatives. And a very awesome soundtrack by John Ottman. I think the bad quality is Lady Deathstrike portrayal in this movie wasn't very accurate to her version of the comics since she's mostly a cyborg in the comics and not really a mutant, but I can just let that slide. This is what I call definitely one of my favorite Marvel films, and it's my fourth favorite X-Men film, and how would I rank it? Well, I would rank it a 9 out of 10. It's the best one of the original trilogy, and best one of the original trilogy. It's still a pretty good watch, fun watch to this day, but fortunately then, we get the weakest of the original trilogy, and well, while it is better than Dark Phoenix, it's definitely very weak, and that is for, of course, X-Men The Last Stand. So, well, what is this movie about? Well, this movie is about the discovery of a cure for mutations leads to a turning point for a mutant. They may now choose to give up their powers to become fully human or retain their uniqueness and remain isolated. War looms between the followers of Professor X, Charles Xavier, who preaches tolerance, and those of Magneto, who advocates survival of the fittest, while Dream Grenadier unleashes the power of the Phoenix. So, what are all the bad parts of this? Well, it has such a weak story. They try to elucidate out two X-Men stories like the Dark Phoenix Saga and Gifted, and it fails as both. Pretty much, characters from the previous films like Nightcrawler are literally not even in the movie for some reason. Oh yeah. I think we can also agree that the film pretty much died when Mystique lost her powers and then Magneto and her group just basically ditched her in the very beginning scene. I feel like that literally ruined the movie. Oh yeah. And they even abruptly kill off Cyclops, which also pretty much ruined the movie and pretty much abruptly almost kill off everybody, basically. Pretty much, this film was pretty much ruined just from the start. There's little to no character development. Like, Colossus is supposed to be more the main character of the movie. It has more speaking lines than X2. The only new character that even gets developed is Kitty Pryde. Warren Warrington also gets Angel, basically a new introduced one, gets little screen into, and even basically filler in. He doesn't even join the X-Men, even though I did think Ben Foster did nail the role, but they basically didn't even give him much screen time, and basically he was just wasted in the end. The love triangle around Bobby, Rogue, and Kitty is very cliche and contributes nothing to the plot. Confusing changes regarding the usual comic characteristics of Solid and Multiple Man, who are often predicted as villains in this film. Very poor directing from one of the worst directors ever, and that's Brett Ratner. Thank God he has not been let anywhere near other X-Men material because he just basically ruined X-Men at the time. Juggernaut is so poorly adapted from the source material as well, but thankfully Juggernaut did get better portrayed in Deadpool 2, so that was thankfully a redemption point after this horrible film. If there is some good qualities, well, Wolverine is still awesome. There are emotional death scenes, even though they do ruin the film. Pretty good acting from Kelsey Grammer as Beast, but this did not even save the film. Villains are awesome, and a very heartwarming ending. Soundtrack composed by John Powell is fantastic. Some good special effects. And action scenes are still cool for the most part, but all in all, I definitely do not like this movie, and I would give it a flat out 5 out of 10. I'd say it's probably the fourth worst X-Men movie ever. Because there are 3 other worse ones I'm about to get to, but I can just let that slide for now. But thankfully, I will get to X-Men Origins did come after Last Stand, but I'm gonna review that one and do the Wolverine films in part 2. But what was the next X-Men group film to come out, which would be 5 years later? And that is, of course, what is actually my third favorite of the X-Men movies. And that, yes, in my opinion, is my third favorite. And that would be X-Men First Class. Man. What's this film about? Well, the film is basically about how the X-Men basically formed, and yeah, and it's also somewhat of a reboot and a prequel. The film takes place in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis, outlining the origins of the X-Men and Brotherhood of Mutants, where they deal with a mutant secret society called the Hellfire Club, as well as how Charles and Eric aka Professor X and Magneto, became enemies. Why does this movie rock? Well, and why it's my third favorite X-Men film? Well, it's an excellent example on how to reboot a franchise, and the casting like James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, and Nicholas Hoult all kill it as Professor X, Magneto, and Beast, respectively. It also revitalized X-Men films after the disastrous X-Men The Last Stand and Origins Wolverine. Unlike the original trilogy, they do make Mystique a little more sympathetic and more stand out. And a refreshing time period in setting 1960s. And, oh yeah, and a funny cameo from Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, who says this awesome line. We actually hear him actually say an F-bomb for the first time. First time, and that was perfect way to bring back his character. The action and special effects are superb. It would pave way to another also good X-Men installment, Days of Future Past, but it's not as good as this film in my opinion, but it's a really fun Marvel movie. I think the bad qualities are Emma Frost is wasted and even killed off screen in the next film. Outside of Charles Xavier, Magneto, Mystique, and Beast, the other X-Men just don't stand out really. And just like Emma Frost, the Hellfire Club are also flat. And not very good villains, but I don't know, despite those flaws, I consider this my favorite of the group X-Men films. So if you take out the solo portrayed Wolverine Deadpool films, I mean, where the X-Men are all together, it would be my favorite of those. And I would give it its third favorite of the X-Men franchise, and I would give it a flat out 10 out of 10. Yeah, it's my opinion, guys, and oh yeah, and it's phenomenally directed by Matthew Vaughn, who directed this after directing Kick-Ass, came to direct this movie, and basically saved the franchise. But then, we all know, Bryan Singer came back to the next Group X-Men installments, and that was, of course, for what I would consider my fifth favorite X-Men film, and that is X-Men Days of Future Past. So, now, sure, I know it's gonna sound weird by saying this, but I think it gets a little too overliked and overrated at times, but like, it's still a good movie, but it just kind of made the timeline a little too confusing, and it just kind of jumbled the timeline a little bit, and that didn't really sit well with me because, well, you all know Logan, all the X-Men kind of just get killed off anyway, so, but what's this film about? Well, convinced that mutants pose a threat to humanity, Dr. Travis, played by Peter Dinklage, develops the Sentinels, enormous robotic weapons that can detect a mutant gene and zero in on that person. In the 21st century, the Sentinels have evolved into highly efficient killing machines. With mutants now facing extinction, Wolverine volunteers to go back in time and rally the X-Men of the past to help change a pivotal moment in history and thereby save their future. Now, here are the good parts. It retcons controversial events of the previous films out of existence, and especially the entirety of X-Men Last Stand and X-Men Origins Wolverine. Amazing special effects, awesome action scenes. It's even great to see the old cast come back for this movie from the original trilogy and the new cast from this trilogy come together in one film. Great acting, especially once again for Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. A good mix of action, adventure, science fiction, drama, and humor. It delivers a good message that the future is never truly set. Oh yeah, and John Ottman's X-Men theme from X-Men United makes its triumphant return in this film, and I especially like that. I think the bad quality is that, yeah, the major retcons kind of complicate the timeline of the franchise, really. So it kind of made X-Men United and X-Men 2000 kind of pointless films as well. Rogue in this movie is in the movie, but most of her scenes are cut out theatrically due to time constraints. The only scenes that remain in the ending is where Logan wakes up in a new timeline. Fortunately, her deleted scenes are added in the Rogue Cut re-release, so thankfully that repaired the film, but all in all, how would I rank it? Well, I would rank it an 8.5 out of 10. It's not as good as First Class, or X-Men United, but I think consider it my fifth favorite, and still a pretty good sequel nonetheless. And then after that, just 2 years after this movie, came X-Men Apocalypse. They're kind of... Now, when this film came out, it met pretty much the same flaws as X-Men The Last Stand happened. It didn't really get well received by critics. It wasn't too big of a hit at the box office, but in North America anyways, but all in all, I think people are a little harsh on it. I mean, it's not great, but I don't think it's terrible. Say, it's not as terrible as like X-Men Origins Wolverine or Dark Phoenix or New Mutants. Man, now, pretty much, yeah, we all know the film's about them stop the apocalypse and is actually set around 1980s. Now, the bad quality, let's just get on with the good qualities. There's a good soundtrack, decent fight scenes, great themes despite the overstuffed plot, and some random moments like the scene where Quicksilver saves everyone, the Charles Xavier Institute, from a big explosion, which did become a meme. Worse, the bad quality is that Apocalypse is a weak and generic villain who plans on destroying the world. He doesn't really do much throughout the entire movie, except from the Horseman, that's pretty much it. But, now Oscar Isaac did give a good performance as Apocalypse, so I'll give credit to that. The plot is weak and overstuffed and moves at a dreadful pace. There's too much exposition and unnaturally stiff dialogue, and very poor acting from Jennifer Lawrence, who has incredibly phoned dialogue, inconsistent CGI effects and unconvincing sets, several pointless deaths like Havoc dies in the movie, yet his death isn't even that impactful. The 80s setting is only there to fill in the gaps with each movie in the continually reboot X-Men saga taking place in a different decade. The movie has also lots of pointless, sometimes intrusive pop culture references, like there's a scene where they actually go see Return of the Jedi in the theater, and they come out saying, I think we agree the third installment's the worst. Pfft. Yeah, funny quote. That should be for every third installment like this. And Return of the Jedi is not the worst. But, not talking about Star Wars, I'm talking about X-Men. Stryker doesn't even do much except delay the plot with a pointless plot thread involving the old and new X-Men getting captured, and then Wolverine being released from his cell to fix everything. And Magneto is such a weak character in this film, was yet another origin story, basically fills the role of Angel from the original arc in the comics, except they forgot the part where he could be redeemed because he didn't kill anyone. Yet here he kills tons of people, and he's still allowed to side with the X-Men for some reason. And two, like, if that's gonna happen, then why would he even be joining X-Men if he's gonna murder? Why would they let a murderer join the X-Men? But, oh no, but, now, it's not good, but it's not terrible. I would give it more 6 out of 10. We call it the 4th worst, but it's just more of a mediocre film. It's certainly better than the next X-Men film I'm about to get to, what is easily the worst X-Men movie, and that's Dark Phoenix. Now, after The Last Stand failed at the Dark Phoenix comic, they tried it again with this movie, except it was even worse. Yeah, this to me is the worst X-Men movie of all time. With, at number 1, what's this film about? Well, during a mission to space, Jean Grey is hit by a cosmic force, which transforms her into the powerful Dark Phoenix. Jean spirals out of control as she struggles with power and her own personal demons, and the X-Men must battle one of their own. You want to know why this movie sucks, and it's the worst one? Well, it messes up the X-Men timeline far more, taking place in 1992, so that James McAvoy's Professor Xavier and Michael Fassbender's Magneto age into Patrick Stewart and Amy on the time span of 8 years. A lot of the villains, especially major villains like Magneto, are nerfed. The main antagonist, Vuk, literally is just one-dimensional and has generic goals. The plot with Jean Grey getting the Phoenix Force is made more confusing because she already had it in the X-Men Apocalypse, New Timeline, and The Last Stand of the original timeline, and pretty much in this film just neither works for it. The story itself is still all over the place. Professor X defeats literally the same motivation he did in The Last Stand. And Mystique, I hated Mystique in this movie because she rudely blames Xavier for not taking one risk, even though he took multiple risks in other films. And don't even get me started on her cringeworthy scene where where she says, and by the way, the women are always saving the men out there, so you might want to think about changing it to X-women. Which basically now just forced in a bunch of unnecessary SJW propaganda rather than good writing. Oh yeah, and they took out the title X-Men because the SJW thought it was sexist. So it's just called Dark Phoenix, really. It just hurt the film more and it caused it bomb considerably. However, thankfully, while her death is cringeworthy, at least they actually killed her off finally because I am not a fan of this portrayal of Mystique. And yeah, I prefer the original trilogy's portrayal, and I'm glad that they finally oafed her off, and now she's finally gone. And now she's finally gone from this version from the rest of the film, at least. Plus, although we already knew we saw it coming because the trailer literally spoiled it, Jean Grey's music theme is okay, but it gets really annoying at times, bad production values, and the film uses to have color of any sort like most of the X-Men films. Plus, oh yeah, Mystique's makeup, once again, it looks cheap and half-finished, because, well, of course Jennifer Lawrence, well, of course, kind of hates the makeup process of Mystique, and I can't blame her for that, honestly. Nightcrawler seems a little bit out of character. Like, he kills people, and when he stabs someone with his tail and barges in front of a car, he has an evil expression in some scenes, some very bad acting, awful writing, a lot of corny, unintentionally funny moments, especially most of the time Judah's afraid to fight, and a lot of characters are being tossed in a lot. Now, redeeming qualities are, yeah, the amazing musical score by Hans Zimmer, performances are decent, James McAvoy's Professor X in this movie actually does look like his comic book counterpart, and of course the unintentionally funny moments. Oh yeah, and the director. Now, what I like about the director is that he actually respected the fans' opinions and actually admitted that the movie was bad, and I do give him respect for that, and actually didn't go attacking the fans like with the Star Wars people, such as, well, Kathleen Kennedy and Rian Johnson. Thankfully, for once, he actually listened to the fans' opinions and didn't go try to defend the film claiming it was art, so I do give him respect for that, so I'm glad he did come out. Now, but I would call it the worst X-Men movie, and I would rate it a 0 out of 10. Anyway, that's it for part 1 of the X-Men films. And now part 2, which I'm going to be doing soon, will be for the Wolverine and Deadpool films. So, stay tuned for part 2, everybody.